interrupt or justify or validate or anything. I don't like sit there completely mute, but I turn over the space to hear people. Oh my goodness me, what a revelation. Just sat there for half an hour listening. It's like amazing.
Do you find it difficult?
I do, because my natural inclination is to like encourage people and like get excited about things. And so I'm resisting that urge. And then I'm thinking, actually, being like that is sort of interfering with me listening. So I just then sort of almost loosen my tone and feel and just let it be. Let that person be heard. And then, that's magic. Yes. I did.
When I was younger, and I kind of, as I got a bit older, I started to realize I did it. And the harm of doing it was when somebody used to speak to me and tell me a story or an experience they went through, my natural reaction was to ratify the way they felt by saying, I understand, I thought I was saying, I understand what you're going through, by actually then describing an event where I went through something similar.
Yeah.
And then I realized that that's just taking the attention off them and putting it on me. That was a harsh lesson.
It is. It comes from such a good place, though, doesn't it? It's like you want to create some empathy with somebody, and you want to really, really show that you've got their attention. But like you say, by natural consequence, you almost like interject too much. It's like, I just shouldn't do that. So I know the coach Nancy Klein's work, Time to Think, and I had a sample of that when I learned some coaching at Henley Business School. And it was really hard and intense to start with. But then when you get into it, like, oh, this is a thing of beauty, man. That has been a great thing to do this week. Just listen to people. Oh, it's just bliss, man. Bliss. How about you? What have you been up to?
I'll just give a reminder to the people that are joining. There's a few early birds. We'll kick off at 2:00. So at the moment, you're just watching me and Perry shoot the breeze.
Shoot the breeze. Love that phrase. Yeah.
A pretty good week, actually. Really busy. There's, the well-being role is. I was supposed to be in Japan for quite a lot of April, and obviously it didn't happen. And so I had a lot of holiday to use because the Benefics holiday year ends in June. So I ended up pretty much taking about 3 or 4 weeks worth of holiday throughout March and April. But there was so much demand for my time with our customers and prospects to talk about well-being that I just didn't want to take the time off because it felt like it was a bit of boom time for what I was trying to do, the stuff I've been talking about for the last couple of years. So really struggled with, the marketing team will tell you that I've kind of had a week off, but then we'll join a webinar Monday, join 2 webinars Wednesday. And it's not as if I've had anything else to do anyway, but it's, it just continues to be really busy. These kind of events, webinars have been running. The marketing team has just done a fantastic job, really focusing on how do we help. Let's forget selling at the moment. It's not the right time to sell, but if we help people out and we get associated with that, then that's a better move for us. And we've had hundreds of people who've never even come to any Benefics stuff before start growing, so it's been really good.
I mean, I think I'm ever so heartened to hear that, mainly because, and you and I have spoken about this, some tactics that people started to use as soon as lockdown came in, like, we're now a remote working expert, come and work with us. It was like, oh, don't be so vulgar. And then you do get people going, yeah, but you've still got to think about a business and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but what you just described was, how can we help? And I think that is so the tone for now. So there's something really nice about saying, in a sort of comfortable way, we've got lots on and we're doing really well because we're clearly offering something people want and we're helping. And we're not doing vulgar sales messages or tactics. We are just being how we want to be for people, and they're recognizing it and coming to us. And as a result, we're really busy. It's like, that's not something to be embarrassed about. That's good. That's people going, I need this. I like it. Yeah.
I think it's, and again, just a little reminder for those people who are joining, we'll begin in at 2. So you're just watching myself and Perry chat about rubbish and all sorts. Until then. Maybe there'll be some bonus content. It's a really interesting lesson, I think, in selling anyway. I think we're at that point where consumers, whatever your product are just kind of more discerning than they've ever been before. And so people clam up when they feel like they've been sold to. And so I think there's a really good lesson at the moment for, if you position yourself as the right kind of employer, if you position yourself as somebody who's actually helpful, who's in it for the right reasons, that has strong values, people will gravitate to you. And I guess we've seen it on the consumer side, where we've seen loads of people gravitate to those businesses and actually move away from those that they didn't want didn't think they did that. So, your Wetherspoon just bought direct to Waterstones.
Yeah.
Companies have just been kicked about in the court of public opinion.
Another random thought, I don't know about you, but like I'm going through notebooks at a rate of knots. So I've tried digital scribing and stuff, and so what I found is, because of being involved in a lot of Zooms, and people are talking about Zoom fatigue, and I'm sort of, not quite in that space, but I found that unless I'm writing a lot of stuff down, that makes it a much more tolerable, enjoyable experience. So yeah, I'm on my second book in about 3 weeks, just notes. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm even trying to be a bit artistic with them, with little, doodles and arrows and boxes, and so random thought while we've still got 4 minutes.
Yeah, for those who just joined, we are beginning at 2, so we're just having a chat at the moment. This chair I use for these webinars, so this is at the corner of my living room, is quite bright, so rather than use the office, I come out here to do it. And for the last couple of weeks or so, my cat, who has never ever once sat in this chair and hasn't been allowed to because it's bright yellow, obviously all sorts of marks on it, been sleeping on it pretty consistently for about 3 days. She's just sat next to me staring at me because I just literally had to pick her off this chair, get a lint roller to get the fluff off, and now she's sat here like, what's going on? This is my chair. I thought this was
lint rollers. Now there's a story. Lint rollers. So Mrs. T is a big fan of lint rollers, and I think they are one of the more underrated analog technologies, shall we say. So if people haven't cottoned onto lint rollers, definitely worth it.
It's I think we've got a cat with white hair, and both of us wear black jeans all the time, and that's not a good mix at all.
No, it's not, is it? Not at all. 2 minutes. So this is out on YouTube, and we're on Zoom. Does it get sort of posted afterwards, Gethin, in its full glory?
It absolutely does. So for those that are listening, we'll begin in a couple of minutes. I can see, I've got my phone in front of me, I can see that people are live on YouTube at the moment. I can see quite a lot of people live on Zoom. We'll make the recording available.
Cool.
Lots of people I know, actually. I can see lots of people: Andrea, Heidi, James, Claire, and everyone. So it's an interesting week. I think it's I guess it's good because it's I think one of the beauties for me anyway, of this whole kind of lockdown has been, when you're busy, it's a good distraction. That's really helped me get through it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose we've all been like creating emerging lockdown strategies about all sorts of things. So people have talked about different routines they've brought in, and people have started to think about, going to different rooms in the house to work, just to give it a bit of variety and all that kind of stuff. So we are amazingly showing up on our sort of adaptability and creativity and all that kind of stuff. But
So we will begin formally in a minute. I can see lots of people joining on YouTube and on Zoom. A couple of messages have come through. So Francisco says hello to Perry and Gethin.
Hey, hi Francisco. Yeah.
Margaret Burnside from Norfolk.
Oh, Margaret.
So there you go.
Margaret and I only normally meet at TJ Awards.
I can actually see why YouTubers get into this. This is quite fun, actually, seeing people come in and share their messages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I do feel like I'm on 24 here because I've got about 5 screens around. One here, so I can see what's going on.
Matija from Slovenia, love that. Yeah, exaggerating the love in Slovenia. Thank you, Matija.
So I went to Slovenia for the first time last summer. The most beautiful places I've ever been. Lake Bled. I had the time of my life staying around Lake Bled. So, lovely country. Hidden gem. That place I don't like. For a long time, I didn't want to tell people was lovely because not many people knew about it. So you didn't want it to be. As soon as someone like EasyJet starts flying there, then it's going to get taken over by tourists. So.
And you use a camera quite a bit, don't you, Gethin?
I do, yeah. So I took some lovely. We had such nice weather. We arrived at Lake Bled, and it was raining, and there was mist, and we were a bit like, oh god. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the mist just rose. We were eating Bled cake, looking over the Lake Bled,
Wow.
which anyone who doesn't know is basically a custard slice, which is my favorite cake. And then all of a sudden it just lifted and the water went bright blue. You could see the snow-capped mountains. Amazing.
Yeah, my favorite place too.
I think we are on time.
We're live. Yeah.
People from London. Hello, Lucia, originally from Peru. More people from Norfolk. Cliff for Windswept,
Coventry.
Is it always Windswept in Coventry? Who knows? Right, okay, so we shall begin. I can see there's lots of people on YouTube, lots of people on Zoom. Right. Heidi from the Isle of Man, who I know from Twitter. Don't think we've ever met in life, though. Hi, Heidi. So let's begin.
Fantastic.
I guess before we get started, appreciate we've got lots of people who have joined us that may not have been on a Benefex webinar before. So we thought it pertinent just to kind of frame who I am and why I'm here. So Perry's bio is a hell of a lot more interesting than mine is. So we've kept his till last. So I've been working in HR tech for kind of 20 years, regular writer and commentator on kind of HR issues, mainly targeted towards kind of employee experience design, well-being. Just like Perry, I wrote a book, A World of Good, Lessons Around the World Improving the Employee Experience. And it was that book that kind of made me realize that the employee experience is, well-being is a really important part of that. So that's kind of why I wanted to focus in on well-being. On the same global influencer list as Perry, actually. I'm only on one. I think Perry's on, what, 50 or something by now. And so a little bit about Perry. So the HR's most influential 2 years in a row, which is pretty impressive. Top 100 HR tech influencer, global TEDx speaker. Lots of your TEDx videos on YouTube. Recommend people go and watch those, some really interesting stuff. Fellow of the RSA, visiting fellow at Sheffield Hallam University, which I went to for the very first time last year. Never been to Sheffield before, went to the university.
Great place. Guest
professor at GEA College in Slovenia, a visiting fellow of Cranfield School of Management, author of Transformational HR, and a new book, The Energized Workplace, which is out very soon, I believe.
August, yeah.
And you are also the founder and CEO of PTHR, which doesn't stand for Perry Tim's HR.
No.
Do people think it does?
Yes, they do. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of in my mind when thinking about what to call a company. And I messed around with things like, Japanese symbols and words and stuff. But no, it's people and transformational HR. Yeah. And that's what we're all about. Connected, collaborative, conscious business activists. That's just a little bit of flouncy terms. But yeah, better business for a better world. There's a lot we can do, I think, to create a better world when businesses do their stuff better. So yeah, that's the ethos. Yeah.
Excellent. And you've got a very impressive team working with you.
There's the team, yeah. So Mexico, Romania, currently Australia, parts of London. Yeah, we're a sort of, I suppose you'd say, eager, keen, and committed bunch of people working very flexibly and remotely. Yeah.
Good stuff. And so this is the new book. So out in August. We would like to give away some of Perry's books, either the new one or the old one, whatever people would like. So anyone that would like to win a book, please send your details to hello@hellobenefex.com. Or if you write in the comments here, one of our marketing team will kind of pick that up and we'll take your details. Great book. I haven't read the new book, but the previous book was very good, really well received. So I think we expect a lot of this new book. And what I really like about it is I'm looking forward to reading lots about kind of well-being and the role that plays in people's career development, how they feel about work and all that kind of stuff. I think that's really important point. And part of well-being that people don't tend to talk about is kind of that career and those values and how do I associate with the business. So yeah, that would be very much looking forward to that. So let's get on with our chat. So as we advertised, this is kind of unrehearsed, unscripted. We didn't really know what we were going to talk about before now. I think what's really interesting is, I pulled out a few stats that have come out of lots of research people have pulled out and conducted over the last week or so. And I think that will give us a really good framework to talk. But I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about was kind of how lockdown's been for you, because I know it's been quite a challenging time for you in the business.
Yeah. I mean, it's a story that I'm sure we'll tell like in a year's time with all sorts of shortcuts and so on. But I can distinctly remember it, March the 11th, coming back from London and starting to pick up the sense of what was going on. I had 2 days of visits down to the South Coast with potential clients that on that evening, I just thought, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And so I got in touch with all of them and said, oh, well, maybe we'll have a call, maybe we'll put it off and stuff. And then, of course, then the lockdown stuff started to happen. So I thought initially, great, glad I made that decision. And then, of course, what happened was people were starting to think about shutting their businesses or scaling down. And then there was this consequence of cancelled work and stuff being deferred. And all of a sudden, I looked at what was the best quarter ever lined up at like vaporizing. And it was, I'm just trying to think about how I reacted to it. I was almost like, oh dear, that's unfortunate, was perhaps my first response, to quite literally like, what on earth am I going to do? So I think, there are several options, aren't there? You can kind of moan, you can curl up in a ball, or you can start thinking, well, what does this mean? And it was just in conversation with the team and one in particular, Brock, who said, why don't you write something? Because, that's kind of how you make sense of stuff, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, actually, what a sensible thing to do. And then I thought, what am I going to write about? And I think I was in the position where what I didn't want to do was just put more noise and pollution and guff out there. And I thought, I've got to be really clever about this or sincere about it. And I didn't really know what to do. But the only word I could think about was heartbreak, because I was bothered about what was going on in that respect. And there were people losing their lives, people in ICU, medical staff pushing themselves to the limit. I'm like, all of this is heartbreaking, not just because I've lost a bit of business. So I thought I wanted to write this piece that was taking the whole thing into account. And I did. And when I posted it, I had no idea what the reaction was going to be, but I think it's hit about 16,000 views. And the response I got from it was phenomenal, because people were like, oh, I've been feeling this too, the tension of my own anxiety or upset or concern, but also just the outpouring of, but look at how bad other people have got it and how we're leaning now on delivery drivers and all this kind of stuff. And I think, there were some moments where I think we all just re-centered ourselves and went, what is it all about? Really, what is it all about? And I think we've all started to exercise a bit more of togetherness and kindness and trust and connection. And literally, Gethin, I was waking up in the morning and I was having messages in my inbox from people I'd never met before who wanted to talk about what they were feeling. And I thought, do I have the time and the headspace for this? Shouldn't I be trying to generate some work or something? And I just thought, I need them as much as they need me. And we were just exchanging all sorts of messages.
You spoke about that, right? So that article, the blog post you wrote, was very kind of an overused word, but quite raw. It was emotionally quite raw. You really held, put your heart on your sleeve and told everyone what it was feeling like. Because I know you've obviously taken on the responsibility of being an employer of multiple people as well. So you were dealing with your own stuff as well as being a business owner. And I think where people have done that through this crisis, that's where you've really seen the advance, and where people have been really progressive is they've realized that actually I can say I'm not okay, and I can say I'm struggling, and everyone else actually rallies around to say, I'm the same way. It's not this.
And you're right. It was the response that kind of got me into a sense of like, right, okay, there's something I could be doing here. And some clients and former clients and people got in touch and went, actually, I'm thinking about the work that I want to do now, and you've just made me think I should have that conversation with you. So that was such a gift. It was like, there are people out there who have just sort of activated something based on that emotional response, not just on something professional or intellectual. And I think, again, that's what we're starting to see a lot more coming through, is people are starting to think, hang on, how do I need people to feel about what I'm talking about? Because that's most important right now. So it comes back to your point on things like well-being. I think people are going, what's the fair, right, equitable, useful, but like well-being oriented thing I can do and say? And I'm loving the sense that we're putting that filter in first, not what makes me look good, what makes me feel good. It's like, I need to take people's feelings into account in the narrative and the dialogue I'm having. And less of it seems to be just about me. It's like, it's us in this. What can we do for each other? So I like to think we've kind of rediscovered that, and maybe that will carry on beyond this kind of lockdown situation, because I think a lot of people are liking this, like, almost rehumanizing version of dialogue. Yeah.
Which,
Did you actually?
nothing like a pandemic to get people to realise that actually caring for each other is the right thing to do in
Yeah.
society and work. But
Yeah.
so one of the bits of research I read over the last couple of weeks, which I thought was interesting to talk to you about, was an organisation called Richmond Events. They found that 83% of companies expect remote working to change how they operate in the future, and that 70% of employers said they found better ways of working during lockdown. So this has been a great experiment, right, in how we work, which has been fascinating. So kind of, what do you think about that? Do you think we will actually change, or do you think this is just going to, next year, the end of next year, we'll just get back to the old ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an area, let's just say, where perhaps I'm making sure my own confirmation bias isn't influencing me so much, right? So we're a remote team, and I value that, and therefore I'm sort of biased towards it. And so when I see things that talk about the success of remote teams, I'm like, yay, yay. And then I see the sort of countermeasure where people come and say, yeah, but you know what? Some people are forced into working at home, and they're homeschooling their children. They share a house. They haven't got a garden. They're working off some laptop in some cobbled together desking situation. And it's like, it's not all just jump in your spare room type stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we have to balance that out. And I think I've been watching the commentary on this quite closely, because aware of that confirmation bias and aware of the sort of downside of being in a sort of remote situation and missing the team and all those kind of things, I've wanted to try and keep my balance right. And what I'm seeing now, so therefore what I'm not sort of feeling towards, but what I'm seeing now is a lot of people very, very legitimately saying, this makes sense. This whole thing of choice and local proximity rather than distant commutes and stuff. Actually, I think it was the CEO of Deutsche Bank only a couple of days ago was talking about his workforce, and he was saying, why are we bringing people into expensive urban centres when they're proving they can look after our clients as well, if not better, from their own homes? And I'm starting to really see that narrative is gathering momentum and increased attention. And Twitter and Shopify and all sorts of companies declaring they're going to commit to a home working thing. I am starting to believe that, yes, we are in the throes of a pretty fundamental shift that will extend beyond lockdown, and people will say, you know what, I discovered that I like being at home at a certain time, to have tea at the table, not just out the oven when I get home at 9 or 10 o'clock, me included in that. And I'm thinking, I don't want to go back. So I think there's some quite compelling psychological and emotional kind of realizations that I think will extend beyond practical, and perhaps even the lure of perhaps the office or the of the workplace that was there before. So I do recognise what Richmond are saying there. I'm picking that up in lots of other places, and I think we are seeing the beginning of a big shift.
It's so just as a sidebar, some people have asked around following this discussion on Twitter. If you want to use the hashtag Benefex Live, then we can follow that, and we can myself and Perry will kind of catch up with you all and retweet your tweets later on as well. But I think what's really interesting is, Benefex as an organisation were able to effectively work from home within a few hours' notice. We were really well prepared for it. And I've worked remotely for 10 years, so for a decade this is kind of how I've worked. And I think when you're used to working, you kind of find what works for you, find a rhythm. You can, when you buy your next house, you buy a house that's got an office or space for a desk. So you grow into it. So overnight, I think flipping people to remote or home working doesn't necessarily work in the same way that it would if it was planned, obviously. But something you mentioned then, which I think is completely missed, and I know you and I are on the same page about this, and we've argued with people on social media about things like flexible and remote working for quite a long time, is that it's about choice. So it's not like everyone's going to go and work from home all day, every day. It's not even that everyone's going to work from home on a Friday or a Monday. It's going to be people, exactly as you said, who will realize that I can get up on a Monday and without a 2 hour, hour and a half commute to work, make brownies or whatever it might be, which, kind of things that they might want to do, and spend more time with the kids, drop the kids off to work. And it's amazing. Like at Benefex a couple of years ago, we decided to reduce the working week. So we reduced the whole working week by 2.5 hours.
Right.
Broadly an equivalent kind of about 6% pay rise, I think, for most people. But by reducing that working week, I think the initial reaction from people, I didn't directly hear this, but I think some of the initial reaction was kind of, so what? It's like half an hour a day, like, big deal. What difference is that going to make? And as it started to bed in, you started to hear the stories of, oh, actually, I left the office at 5 rather than 5:30, and there's no traffic, and I got home in 10 minutes. All these people who were saying, I mean, I had one guy who loves Pointless. He'd been on Pointless, and he could go home and watch Pointless rather than watch it on catch up and tweet along with it, all that kind of stuff. And people started to realize that just a very small amount of flexibility in that traditional way of working. And I, like someone who's worked from home for 10 years, pretty much, I have no idea how anyone gets washing done. Because I can put it on and then go into the other room and then come out at lunchtime and put it out to dry. It's like, when does everyone else do this? When's everyone else got time for a 3-hour spin in their washing machine?
Yeah, I mean, you probably know as well as anybody that I kind of got caught up by accident in lots and lots of travel that meant I was pinging over to different parts of the world, including lovely Slovenia, as we said earlier on. And whilst it was, something you do, it was completely obliterating a number of different things in life, and you didn't really sort of notice it. And then it comes to a hard stop, and then you think, am I missing that? No. Whilst it's lovely to go to those places, just having the choice to do the things in your own proximity actually is like, I've forgotten how much I enjoyed this kind of stuff, setting the table and all that kind of thing. So I think like you that we've rediscovered quite a lot of things, and just small adjustments are starting to make huge differences in people's lives. And I guess there is still the thing that people say, yeah, but you need to come together to build the team fabric and all that kind of stuff. Bit like you, I've been doing remote stuff for 20 years now, and I was often the one who wasn't in the room, who was on the video call and got forgotten about in the meeting. And so when you feel that sense of ostracization, you kind of like think, oh no, I better just jump in and join in because I'm missing out now. But if everybody or most people are remote, then actually you do make a bigger adjust. So I still think we'll see that shift, and I still think we'll value time together, and we'll find a way to do it, but it just won't be every day. I mean, the amount of people who commute, sit at a desk, they're around their teams, they perhaps have the odd meeting, then plug the headphones in, and they're like buried in their machine for 6 hours a day. It's like you could have done that from anywhere. And they seem to make less effort to socialize in that space. Whereas when we were forced into lockdown, you kind of jump on Slack or MS Teams more, and you chat more, and you have little check-ins more, and you sort of compensate for it. And it does feel like you're connected. So we're remarkably adaptive creatures. And I think we should be, not too romantic about the past, and just think, what can I do to give me the best of all of this situation? And I think what I am really encouraged by is where I see people who've got like leading responsibility, not ordering people back or ordering them to be remote, but choice, options, flexibility, and something where it's even like, it isn't just whether you're in the office or whether you're at home, but is there a third space? Can you go to a remote working space? Can you go to somewhere that's an art gallery near where you drop your kids off, where you could hole up for a couple of hours to do your work in that way? And I'm thinking we've got that opportunity, certainly for people that are knowledge workers. And then we need to be careful about those people who have to be in a place, who work in a dairy or a firefighter or something. It's like they don't often have the remote working option. And so we need to be mindful of all of those kind of combinations. But I think as a rule, I think remote working's got a longer tail than people are giving it credit for.
And it's quite interesting. So this relates to a couple of questions that we've had asked
Cool.
live. I'll point those questions out first. So
Nice.
one of them from Margaret was, how else will companies create some face-to-face opportunities for teams if more work from home most of the time? And there was another, which was, how do we create those kind of water cooler moments as well? So how do we kind of do that virtually? And we're 2 months into this, right? And so people have kind of had that challenge. And again, relating it to my own experience, it's interesting what you say about those different spaces, because having, I'm 2.5 hours drive from our office. I live in Cardiff. Our office is Southampton. Most of my work's done in London. And so I have found where I work based on the work I'm doing. So I think you and I talked before about, if I'm writing something or doing something creative, There's an art centre close to me that I go to, and you're surrounded by really kind of liberal arts people. It's a nice environment for that. If I need to get my head down and do some work, I actually go to Starbucks close to me, headphones on, sit in the corner. I'm the kind of guy that's been there so much, they know me. I'm the annoying one taking up space. And then there's other stuff, you know, when I make calls and video calls, I do that at home. And I found that groove of what works. And so I think it's really interesting that you should say that it's not just about working from home. It's about finding a place to work that works for you.
Yeah. I mean, talking to Margaret's point about the face-to-face opportunities, I guess what I like about what we're going through right now is that we are seriously questioning the sort of premium optimized versions of that, so that we're not all together all the time, so we take it for granted. And so having a remote team, you know, there's just been one or two times that we've been able to come together, and we absolutely make the most of that. There's a bit of social connection. There's some very good stuff that we want to do that's creative and active. So I still think we'll do that. And obviously we've got to get into that socially distant sort of area and anxieties over that, because, you know, I've come across an already existing condition, which is social undistancing, which is where people are like, actually, I've got quite comfortable with social distancing, and now I've got to change that. So I think we need to think about the real reason we want people to come together and like massively celebrate and make the most of that, because I think we do need to perhaps punctuate remoteness with some connection. So, I mean, there are some companies I know that are solely remote, like Buffer and Automatic, the tech companies, and they have about 3 summits a year in different parts of the world, and they kind of make a big deal out of it for like 2 or 3 days. So people really, really bond, and maybe we'll see some of that. And the water cooler moments, then that's a really interesting one, because those just kind of random exchanges that you get, how do you plug them in? Well, you don't program them, do you? But
on a previous webinar, Karen Weeks, VP of People at Order Groove, she created a Slack channel which was water cooler. We've done the same thing at Perfect on Teams, and it is an opportunity to share pictures of your dogs, your cats, talk about what you're watching on Netflix, and it's not a replacement for that face-to-face interaction. I think the reality is that my view would be, at the moment, we're doing the best with what we've got. When things get back to normal, you will want those. You know, as somebody that works remotely, I still feel like if I'm not in the office at least 2 or 3 times a month, I start to feel quite disconnected from the organization. So I need, just even if it's just going there to wander around, to have those little moments, I think it's quite important.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts on that is, like, on our Slack channel, we have a daily check-in. So we log in and we say, hey, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm working on, and random stuff. And it seems to spark into those things, as if you stop by the water cooler and say, hey, I haven't seen you for a while. What are you up to? But we literally do it every day. And it's a really nice way of, I suppose, like letting people know what your thoughts are, what you're up to, what your mood is, and all that kind of stuff. And that works. So I do see where programs like Slack and platforms like Slack can help. And we've started to have a little happy hour on a Friday at 4 o'clock, where we just dial into Zoom and we do nothing but just kick around how we are, what we're up to, favorite movies, whatever. And it's really nice. It's really nice. So you can sort of create little opportunities through digital for water cooler moments, but regularity of contact with people on messaging apps, just I still get it now. So
I think it's interesting. If you look at, so there was a really big study into kind of how mobile technologies changed youth behavior in the US about 2 years ago. Amazing stuff came out of this study. They found that the mobile culture had reduced the amount of casual sex American teenagers are having. American teenagers were drinking far less than any generation ever before. They weren't going to things like shopping malls, which obviously this traditional idea we have of teenagers in America is that every Saturday you go to the shopping mall and the cinema. That wasn't happening. But they found that they were having significantly more daily interaction with their friends than before, but they were just doing it through WhatsApp and Snapchat. They were actually having less face-to-face. So there's probably something in just the way society is at the moment that, you know, that connectedness via technology exists anyway. So even outside the pandemic, that's how we lived our lives, rightly or wrongly.
And you know what? I don't want to like overplay this, but I don't want us to underestimate either how strong the sort of digital only version of it can be, because you know, so one of the team, Brock from Australia, she and I met through LinkedIn. We just messaged through Skype and gradually built up to do some work together. And then she gave up life down under to come over here and work for a while. She's back down there now because of the pandemic, but we'd never met in real life. And like, when was that ever a recruitment technique that we used? But we built up such a strong knowledge of each other just through messaging that that it just felt like the most normal thing in the world to do. And some of the other team, Jess, I met 10 years ago, and we only kept in touch randomly because she went to work across different parts of the world. And again, electronic stuff kept us in touch. So
online a long time before we met in real life.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
almost it's like online dating. It's this weird thing where you meet them face to face, and you have you've seen enough pictures of them, and you've got a good idea about who they are. But I think that's a really good example. You think about television programs like Catfish and 90 Day Fiance. There are people there who would consider themselves as being engaged or in a relationship with somebody that they've only met online. Now the reality is when you think about it, if you've spoken to that person through chat message and also kind of voice message or telephone calls, if you video chatted with them, you've got their mannerisms, you've got their story, you understand what their likes and dislikes are. If you've seen the photographs of them, the reality of doesn't change much anymore. Technology is that, when I used to first do online dating when I was kind of 23, the person you met was very, very much not the person you thought you were speaking to. But now that technology means you can't hide that. So actually, there's people I've met up with like you, where you're just like, actually, this is the same guy I expected to meet. Not just to caveat that with, we didn't online date.
Exactly. I'm glad you added that bit. But there is something, isn't there, about the fact that when you see the regularity of what people post, and you then enter into conversations with them, you do kind of get to know them. Because whilst you're right, the world of dating, I think back to the Ricky Gervais Office sketch when he went on an online date or whatever it was. But there was definitely something about the fact that fakery has been replaced by that sort of sincerity of exchange. I mean, just going through sort of stuff to do with pandemic and stuff, I've had some phenomenal exchanges with people who have really shared some deep thought stuff, and all we've done is message each other, but we've both felt better about it. And it's like, it may just seem like you're exchanging a few texts, but actually you are being probably more honest because you're not sat across a table talking to me, and more vulnerable because you're able to write it down. And therefore I'm seeing really deeply into what is affecting you, and I can respond in kind. And so I don't think we should, again, underestimate how powerful that can be, and as a supplement to what you've got in the face-to-face world in real life. Replacing it totally, maybe not, but I think we could dismiss it easily as just cold exchanges, but it's not. You can be ever so warm in that sort of area, and I found it anyway. I've had loads of people send me lovely stuff.
We've got some comments that have come in. I'd like to read some of these out. Some of these are quite interesting.
Right.
So from Cliff Evans, interesting view from Andrew Pettigrew. Technology has never really delivered on the scale of what was initially thought, hoped, or feared. And Cliff says, I'm a 70s kid and I'm still waiting for my hover skateboard. Keep waiting, Cliff. It's coming, I promise. It would be an awful loss if organizations don't use this impetus created to create a better work-life balance where possible. Agree with that. Andrea Sutherall, hi Andrea, how are you? I wonder if being catapulted into new ways of working as we've done in prior weeks will actually help us move the dial even further on new modes of working, including a 4-day working week.
Yeah.
Jacinda Seals, Prime Minister of New Zealand, is kind of really pushing that envelope, isn't she?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I've been following the work of the New Economics Foundation for quite some time, who've done a significant amount of looking into the 4-day week. And I know there are people that have experimented with it already. I know Henry Stewart offered it at Happy Training, and it didn't quite work for them. But I think generally the principle I think that Jacinda Ardern is looking at is pretty much like, let's completely recalibrate it so that there's a 4-day option for you, and there's an extra day to do like tourism or leisure or whatever it is. So it's almost like the Henry Ford idea of not working people for 7 days because they haven't got the time to then buy a car that I want to sell them. So let's have them work 5 days so they've got the time to use that car at the weekend, without it being like commercially vulgar. I think Ardern is thinking we can gently get people into a situation where we can create a distinction that might just see us through this tough period. I mean, let's face it, I saw a headline this morning about the high street crash. and that retailers have had their worst slump ever. And you know, you could argue that, well, you know, online might have gone up or whatever it is, but people have really gone into like, what do I need? Where do I need to spend my money? I probably need to keep money in case I hit hard times. And we've questioned everything we buy. So there are some out there who I think are saying this is the beginning of the post-materialistic mindset. And it could be, it really could be. I know lots of people have said, I am going to commit to supporting my small local businesses who are now offering online so that I can support them and go through a change. So I think we are voting with our feet and our economics. And as a result of it, I think those that make policy are having to listen and think, how do we respond to this? If we don't need to spend as much money, do we need to work as long to earn the money that we used to? So we've gone from abundance, I think, to you know, just trying to create some sensible balance. I'm all for that. Again, choice, option. I think you can mandate a 4-day week and you'd still get some people like me perhaps, and you sometimes, who would go, you know what, I want to work anyway. But then that's because we're choosing to do that. You know, nobody's putting a clamp on us. But as a rule, a 4-day week could be very interesting to explore as a result of this.
Yeah, there was I'm kind of I would like to see us test it, or a country test it on a large scale. It's worked with loads of the case studies are very small, agile organizations in some way. So apologies for the cat that's jumped up behind me. She's never done that before, so something about you, Perry, is attracting my cat.
I do have feline tendencies,
So something else I wanted to talk to you about as well, because this has kind of come up in quite a few webinars that we've run, is about, you know, at BenefX, we talk quite a lot about the personalization of the employee experience. So actually your audience is now one person, because we're all so different and we're so diverse. How can we kind of just do one thing and expect it for everyone? And a talk I gave last summer was about, you know, when did treating everyone the same become the fair thing to do? Because it just doesn't make sense. I think what's been pulled out of some of the research I found in the last couple of weeks was, you know, this virus has affected everyone differently. We're all experiencing it differently. And something that the ONS produced this week was that 1 in 8 people in the UK don't have a garden or access to a shared garden. And they found that most people who don't have access to a shared garden are people of colour. And they found that black people are 4 times more likely not to have an outside space than their white counterparts. And the IFS is saying that the recession that will follow the pandemic in the UK, you'll see low-income workers and women being more adversely affected. And so it's kind of like, that just gets me thinking about, you know, how do you run an organization where people are so different? You know, how do you give people what they need? And it just comes back to choice again, doesn't it? If everyone's treated like an individual and gets given the choice to work how and when is right for them.
I mean, you've got me thinking now about that whole, like you say, audience of one type thing and the personalization of the work experience and stuff. And you'll know Rob Baker's work on job crafting, and I'm very interested in that and wanting to actively use it. And I've often thought what's missing in the workplace, and we've seen this through the pandemic, but I'll hit it anyway. What's missing in the workplace is that people know the value of what they do. Both individually and, you know, to a job description or whatever it might be. There are people who aren't sure of their worth. And I don't just mean that in a monetary sense. I mean in all of the dimensions. And the reason we seem to not teach them that is because, I don't know, why don't we teach them that? Why don't people know the value they create? Because I think there's a whole different sense of their contribution and the things they want to get from their work. And I think that's right at the heart of that personalization of the work experience. And then I think we can start to see people who will know unfairness, who may be able to create enough social pressure to override some of that, and bring people to rally to a cause to kind of say, look, I'm not even affected by that. I'm kind of privileged in certain ways, but I don't like the unfairness that I see other people experience it. And you bring some pressure to change. So, you know, we've introduced policies, we've introduced legislation, and that's obviously the right thing to do to kind of baseline this whole subject. But I like to think that there are enough inequalities for people to rally around and create a number of different cells and groups to put the right pressure in to stop that from happening, to bring a much more egalitarian approach to how things are. A lot of it is behaviours, so people have kind of learnt to either create inequality because that gives them a sense of power or some whatever it is, or tolerate it. And sometimes there is almost like this challenge that you have where it's like, but I'm only worth this. And I really, really hate to hear that when people say, yeah, but I'm just the receptionist or I'm just the administrator. I'm like, whoa, that belief has been put on you, and there's something wrong in the fact that you haven't got a counter argument about the value that you create and the importance you have to your business. So I think there's something we can do there as a result of this pandemic, because we've seen it. Key workers, they're not called low skilled, low paid anymore. They're key workers. There are people who now have so much respect for lorry drivers and Amazon delivery people and frontline nurses and whatever you want to say, that this has made us remind ourselves that we're not fair. And I think there's something big to do there.
It's I made the decision quite early on when I was doing shopping. I was shopping for my parents as well, like self-isolating. And I kind of was watching this woman kind of put all the shopping through. I'd bought, 2 different kind of orders. And I just kind of thought, what, we're all walking around with gloves and masks on and distancing ourselves. And this woman was sat there with no protection whatsoever. And so she finished packing, and I said, oh, thanks very much. And thank you for working as well, because it's appreciated. And it felt really kind of contrived for me to say it. And I felt a bit awkward saying it. It was almost like the American thank you for your service type thing. But now it's as normal. And she actually, she got a little bit choked up and said, well, thank you. Appreciate you actually saying that. Now I keep saying it, and people are like, you're welcome. It's like, so I'm really glad that we've got to that place where people are like, yes, you're welcome. It's not an unusual thing to say. Lots of people must have said it. And something you said then, which reminded me of when I was 18, I worked in Staples, the office superstore. And we had a guy who came to work there. I think his name was Alan. And we found out after a couple of months that he used to bring a briefcase to work, and his briefcase used to have just sandwiches in it. And people used to kind of take the mick out of him for it. But we soon found out, and I remember speaking to him, that he used to run a chain of newsagents, and he lived above one of them. And he would use his briefcase, and he had a Mercedes and all that kind of stuff. And he ended up losing all 3 businesses that he owned, and ended up having to then come and work part-time at Staples, or full-time, but working on the shop floor. And I remember I overheard people just taking the mick out of him, a group of people I worked with. And even as an 18-year-old, I remember I jumped in and kind of said, he hasn't gone from being successful to unsuccessful. The reason why he's working is because he's got 3 daughters and he has to work. And it really gave me this idea of, if your purpose is just to put food on the table for your family, why is that enough? Why is this illusion that a successful career or the car you drive become a measure, and how much you earn? It's just, I hope part of what we get out of this is the realization that actually the amount of money you earn and whether you wear a suit to work, there's no basis on how valued you are as an employee. It's the service you offer to people.
So I think, just picking up a number of threads on that one, but one in particular strikes me, is people who are train guards or receptionists or whatever often wear a name badge with their first name on it. And I found myself very deliberately saying stuff like, thank you, Andrea, nice to see you, Colin, picking the name thing up. And the response I got was phenomenal, because it was almost like, you've seen me and I am not just like here to service a need. And I felt so good about that. And it was only just a couple of things I sort of picked up and thought, that should be the right thing to do. And I think we're now going to accelerate and amplify that. So I'm happy to do that. But like, I haven't driven much since lockdown, but when I have, and I've overtaken like a Sainsbury's lorry or something, as I pull in, I put my hazards on a couple of times, almost like to say, thank you for doing what you're doing. And they always flash back. And so there's almost like this respect thing that's come out of that. And I'm thinking, cool, I hope that lasts, because that's good, But you're right. It's about the whole worth and why you do what you do, and not judging and not. I think there's something that's really equalising that's come out of this. I know some people are perhaps a little bit over the clapping on the Thursday, but I'm still doing it, because I'm sort of thinking, well, I'm lucky. I haven't had to go into ICU or got a loved one who is in frontline care at the moment. But I know people who are like really ill still. They've had COVID-19. They've been, sort of self-isolating and stuff, and they're still really struggling with it. And I'm like, and they're medical people who have done that because they have to. So there's a new sense of respect, I think, that's coming through, that I hope we continue with.
So there's a couple of comments that have come through I'd like to read. So Cliff says, my 15-year-old manages his relationships online already. It will increasingly become the norm. I think that's absolutely true.
Mm.
Emily talks about Mary Portas referring to the kindness economy. She's a great woman. She's done some great stuff. Even during lockdown, she wrote a great article in the Guardian about the kind of things that need to be changed. Maddie says, I think that's why social media spread so quickly. It's another tangible way to measure kindness, popularity, and impact, other than wages. Other ways are less tangible. Even in psychology, right? So the endorphins run when you get a like and a share. So it's kind of, we're bridging that gap between technology and psychology. And I want to, before we kind of wrap up, want to get through to some of the questions we've had as well.
Yeah, of course.
So this is anonymous. How do you think this pandemic will impact our children and their expectations for the world of work?
Oh, wow, that's a big one, isn't it? Right, okay. So I think, children are really tuned and sensitive, I think, to a lot of this. And I do recognise the whole, if we restrict schooling and kids go back to school, how do you keep kids away and respect social distancing and stuff? But they're more responsive and they're more deductive than I think sometimes we give them the credit for. Equally, they are creative until we batter it out of them with a production line education system. So there's a combination for me there, which is an understanding that whether it's through parental conversations or the education system or whatever, the understanding of what's happening and why in terms they can understand, and then the chance for them to understand their creativity is what's needed more in the future than their conformity. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. So I really hope we look at education differently. I really hope this is a chance for people to say, gosh, it isn't just that I send kids to school in the hope that they get educated. There's a richer experience for them out there. And I want to see us have a real systemic reaction to it because of that. So yeah, I guess we should begin to prepare them for a world that needs difference, I guess is what I'd say, and creativity more than conformity.
And this is a really good question, actually. This is from Maddie. Do you think there's a danger that the case for remote working longer term will be impacted by the economic crisis we're in or heading into? Maddie says she worries that organisations will look back and think it was okay whilst general productivity was lower, but that old BAU will be required for growth again.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because the stimulus behind a lot of the decisions we've taken in the latter part of the 20th century, early 21st, has been around the economics of it. But I think I'm starting to see a lot more people show a more rounded set of what they value, like human and social and ecological. So I'd like to think that if there's any kind of reset on that we reset on a much more balanced view, not just what's the, how do we stock up the pile of cash again, but how can we actually look at the consequence of not having to commute so much on the environment, and what we are actually offsetting. And so, I think we ought to bring those measures in. So there are a number of different, economic scorecards. Kate Raworth's Donut Economics is one of them, which is all about, regeneration, not just consumption. So I'd like to see us start to introduce new measures, and as consumers vote with our choices, and as employees vote with our choices. There are some employers whose names I won't name, where I genuinely understand why people work there, because they need the money perhaps, but feel the tension of a terrible brand or a terrible culture. I'd love to think that we could use this as an opportunity to give them an escape route from those, so that those are the companies that wither and die, and the ones that thrive and are built on human spirit, on much more about the positive impact they have on society and community, so that we can take our labour in that way, and we can make the choices on what we do spend in that way, and we all contribute a tiny bit to an economic shift.
Which I think is fascinating. A couple of things we talked about today all kind of converged, I think, to help answer that question. Yep. Social media means the court of public opinion is in permanent session, is alive and well, and people are very, very open to telling you the truth about the places they work and the people they work with. It's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and we have seen absolutely the number of tweets I see from people saying that company X is telling you mental health is important to them. Yeah, I know the way they fired a colleague of mine because they did it via email, or they furloughed people by email without having a conversation. And now they're saying the mental health of people is important, and people are like, forget it, I don't believe it. And so I think, we've seen Uber, Wells Fargo, Sports Direct, all these companies over the last couple of years dragged across the coals because of the way that employees have exposed. And Emily mentioned Mary Portas in her statement. And Mary Portas' article this week in the Guardian says that people want to work with companies that are doing right by other people, and they will start to vote with the money they spend. So it kind of stands to reason that although during a recession it's difficult for employees to move jobs, if we get back to the kind of, we just come out of a 40-year high of employment in the UK and the US. As soon as that returns, and then people are like, do you know what? I can look on LinkedIn and get a job as quickly as I can order an Uber or a pizza. So if you're not doing that, then why am I going to do it? And I guess one of the great things I've seen come out of this whole experience has been the positives. Flip side of that are those companies that have said, you said about choice before, and giving people if they want to work and they don't feel safe at work, giving them the choice around that. People like Leon have done that. They're like, if you want to be furloughed, we'll furlough you. If you want to work, just tell us and we can work. But if you do work, our profits are going to the NHS, and our food is 50% of it's going to go to the NHS as well. So if you do work with us through this pandemic, you're going to be doing it for a good reason and a good cause. If you don't feel safe doing that, there's no stigma. It won't come back on you. I'd love to be doing. Our jobs would be a lot harder if everyone employed people like that.
I think, that talks to a lot of work that you and I have been sort of watching about the whole rise of purpose, and how some people have perhaps used a little bit of what we can only call creative wordsmithing about the purpose, and purpose washing has become this thing. However, the saints and sinners list you're talking about is exactly what's going to, I think, define a lot of organisations and people and choices throughout this. I suppose the only thing I'll throw in as an unknown is just how much, even if it's recession based, how much people are then going to invest in automation and robotics, because they're going to think, hang on, these people, they're ever so vulnerable because they can get ill. So actually, let's get some more robotics and more automation, then we can keep going. I wonder whether the unspoken kind of spectre here is the acceleration of automation as a result of it. What might keep it at bay is there might not be as much money to invest in it, but there might be some people willing to do that to get ahead of any future pandemic or whatever. So it'd be interesting to watch that one.
Well, what was it? Wasn't that famous quote by somebody who was being, I think, a union boss, being taken around Henry Ford's factory, showing all the, or Ford factory, showing all the different robots making cars. And they basically said, look at how great this is. And he apparently turned to the boss and said, robots can't buy cars.
Yeah, there is that, right? There is exactly that. So, are we facing a completely different economic model based on the fact that production could almost hit like zero because robots can do it so, consistently and, without break and stuff like that. And then you're thinking, what do people do? Well, they don't work, so they don't get any money. So what are they going to buy? Yeah. It's just...
When you and I had a chat last week, I'd watched a documentary on FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, big fan of American presidents, not the current one, but most historic ones. And, kind of when he kickstarted the US out of the Great Depression, it was the realization that people had to work and live valued lives and be looked after. So the government just were like, okay, we're going to build roads and we're going to build bridges, because that way we can give people jobs, which means they're going to be happy and content and they'll spend money. And that kickstarts the economy. So it's big business can't kickstart the economy. The government can't do it in so many ways. It's got to be people. So people have got to be well, healthy and happy for economies to survive, which is...
Agreed.
So we have pretty much run out of time, I'm afraid. We've got lots of questions we haven't got round to. You and I could have talked for hours anyway, I'm sure, just about anything. So we just wanted to kind of remind everyone that as part of these webinars that we're running, we are offering a free wellbeing consultancy session with myself. Value that what you will. But if you're interested in that, please let us know, hello@hellobenefex, or contact us through Twitter @hellobenefex, or through the comments on Zoom and YouTube Live. We also have another event coming up next week with David Beanie and Sian Myers. So Sian talked to us about being one of the first employers in this country to furlough, and furloughed a significant number of their staff. As a house builder, they're now the first going back to work, and have started going back to work this week. So they're going to talk to us about how do we maintain good mental health among those in construction, which is already pretty poor as it is, even pre or post. academic, and Davey's going to talk about his own experiences of mental health as well. So thank you so much for having been involved. There's quite a lot of you. Sorry we didn't get around to all those questions. Continue that conversation with myself, Perry, and Benefex at #BenefexLive. We're both pretty active on Twitter. Would love to carry on having these conversations with you. And thank you so much to Perry. You're a lovely bloke. You're a great friend. You always give me so much to think about, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us.
Thanks. Enjoyed it immensely, and thanks to everybody for sticking with it and listening, and hopefully being part of this coalition of the hopeful to change things for the better.
What a great note to end on. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care, have a great weekend, and stay safe.